Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, Sow, Grow, Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of Sow, Grow, Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together, we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am so honored to have Dr. Rob Harter here on the podcast. He reached out to me a few weeks ago, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with him and learn more about his experience in leading and building nonprofit organizations. He is a nonprofit executive professional with over 29 years of experience. And he has helped with fundraising, leadership, and leveraging resources and managing organizational growth. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Rob.
Hey, Haley, thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
Well, I would love to go way back, but what's your background in nonprofits? What led you to leading and managing nonprofits and doing the work that you did today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like from early on, I've had people in my life that really have influenced me and impacted me that were in nonprofit organizations. And so I always felt like I had a very good exposure to people that were leading nonprofit organizations. Thought, hey, I would love to be in a position where I could positively impact others. And then I've always had, I give a lot of credit to my parents. I feel like I've always had the mission mindset of being very mission driven in my life. And so nonprofits are always mission driven organizations. And so that was a good fit. And so pretty much when I went to college and right after college, I've been involved with various nonprofit organizations of all different sizes ever since. And so it's really been one of those experiences for me that's been my whole career has been the nonprofit sector and love it. I think it's one of the unique places because it is so mission driven. People are typically in nonprofits because they really want to make a difference in the world. They really want to accomplish their mission. They see a problem in the world they want to address, whether it be food insecurity or health disparities or whatever the issue is that's a real hot button issue for them. They want to be part of an organization that's going to really address that and provide resources to alleviate those situations. And so that's always been just a good fit for me. And so, yeah, it's hard to believe, but now it's almost 30 years of being in that role of various roles of different types and different organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I love that mission driven is at the forefront of everything that you do and like your passion. And like you said, yes, most of us have passion and those mission driven mindsets that want to join into nonprofits. With your extensive career in nonprofit leadership, spanning almost 3 decades, can you share some of the key changes you've witnessed in the nonprofit sector over the years and how you've adapted to these changes?
That's a good question. I've not been asked that for a long time. So yeah, without going into a 20-minute diatribe on, or just a long conversation and answer, what would be some of the key things that stand out? I think I would say number one, that just the number of nonprofit organizations has really grown exponentially in I would say the last 20 years for sure. So I think there is a real hunger and a pent up desire for people to get involved in organizations like the nonprofit sector provides. Interestingly, too, I've seen a lot of corporations, and I think, again, about the last 15, 20 years, corporations have their own social impact arm. So they'll have their own foundation, maybe, or a philanthropic arm of the CEO's corporation, that maybe the CEO started a company and then they want to be very much socially conscious. And so they'll create this social impact fund or social impact arm, social impact organization, even within the organization that's a business, but it has this philanthropic impact to it. So I've seen that's a big change. And I feel like that's been real interesting because even the last 10 years, I'd say some really large corporations from Google to Microsoft, many of those I've actually had my own podcast talk about what they're doing on the philanthropic arm because they realize, I think, two things. Number one, they have great influence and ability. They have a lot of money and resources, but they have a lot of staff that want to make a difference. I definitely feel like, so that's maybe a third trend. I feel like certainly this generation, but the last two generations, I feel, have been very much, I think, driven with the desire of not just to make a buck, so to speak, make money in their job, but to make a difference with their job. So I think there's been a heightened interest. So even if they took a job at Google or even a small company that's in the business realm or the for-profit sector, they would like to make a difference with their time and through the business. And so I've definitely seen a huge increase with many more businesses and corporations getting into, if you will, the nonprofit field. And then the last one would just be, I'd say the biggest changes for nonprofit leaders really has been since COVID. And what I mean by that is I think there's been just a big shakeup in terms of nonprofit organizations that some just didn't survive COVID. They didn't make it. And I think then also a lot just re-examined what is their mission? What's their vision? Can they be sustainable? I think a lot of nonprofits have merged with other ones because they were just couldn't keep themselves going. And then others have really completely taken off, right? They got a lot of influx of money and support after COVID because their mission was particularly tied into something people were very excited about and was very relevant since COVID happened. And so there's some nonprofits that have literally just tripled in size since. So it's been, I won't say a dichotomy almost of some that just have fallen away. And then others have really grown that much bigger and are making even a bigger impact. And I think even, again, going back to corporations and government agencies for that matter, are really leaning on nonprofits probably more than ever. So those are a few of the trends. I could talk about more, but those are a few ones that just immediately jump out when you ask that question.
Yeah, I love that. And I think those trends are so important. And I had someone early on in my podcast, his name's Zoot Velasco, and he talked about how during these challenging times, the key to successful nonprofits is building social entrepreneurship and social enterprises. But I would love to get your take on what you think is those organizations that really took off over the last 4 years. Are there some key characteristics or traits that they embodied to be able to scale at that rate?
Yeah, and you're thinking like the businesses with a social impact arm or more just nonprofits in general?
More nonprofits in general.
That's a really good question. Yeah, from what I can see, and people that have been on my show and just my own experience and interact with lots of nonprofit leaders, I feel like the ones that have really been able to scale and grow exponentially, number one, they were able to pivot during COVID. They were able to really shift quickly to the changing landscape that we found, right? And they were able to make changes quickly and be nimble in order to respond to the new needs that they saw. It's like number one, that was the number one trait, I think, was just that nimbleness, be able to respond to the new needs. I think number two, those who had a really clear mission and a compelling mission. I think people got really excited about organizations that were really making a difference. And if you have a compelling mission and you're able to articulate that well, people got behind it. And I think then the third one is really being able to demonstrate your impact to donors. And we're getting into fundraising now, but I think that's one of the key things. Nonprofits that are doing well, that are continuing to expand, they're able to explain and clearly demonstrate the impact they're having in a real measured, demonstrated way. I think that's what donors want. They want their money to go to an organization that's doing good work, but then they want to know, hey, where is my money going? What kind of impact are you having when I give you my gift for $5,000 or $50,000? So the ability to do that well, I think, has really separated out those nonprofits that have grown.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point because, in trainings that I do, I always say there's 3 reasons why people don't give. Number one, they're not asked. Number two, things, or number three, they're not shown the impact of their gift. They want to see those stories and that tangible outcome or ROI, because ROI isn't in dollars in nonprofits, right? But they want to see where their money is going and how it's being used. And as a nonprofit, it's our responsibility to be good stewards of that money and be transparent and accountable with the money that's bestowed on us. So, what are some of the fundraising trends that you have seen over the last few years in the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, sadly, Haley, I would say the trends overall have not been good for nonprofits. There's this big spike during COVID. A lot of people gave during that time, which is great because I think people just were all compelled to say, hey, we want to make a difference. So you saw this big spike with most nonprofit organizations initially. And then what most trends now have shown that they've gone back down to pre-COVID levels, which were already on a downward trend. And so it's 10% drop in, I think it's corporate giving. It's like higher than more like 15% in personal giving in terms of a drop. So there's definitely this consistent, sadly, negative trend line for people giving. Now, the other interesting thing, if you look at some of that data, oftentimes what's keeping some of those numbers up are really a few individuals that have huge impact. A lot of a good example is Mackenzie Scott, right? It's been very well publicized. She's been giving big gifts, like $1 million gifts, $10 million gifts to certain organizations. So she single-handedly is keeping that number high. But when you look at individual giving, besides those kind of one-offs of people that have lots of money to give, and foundations for that matter too, it's much less. So people are giving less of their money to charity and nonprofits. So that's a bit of a challenge. And I think that's going to continue to be a challenge for the next couple of years. Well, it depends on inflation, right? And the economy, of course. So that's, I think, one of the big trends. The number two trend, I think, is more and more people are trying to figure out, okay, how do I maximize AI? How do I maximize social media? How do I really interact with my donors, but maybe utilize all these great tools that are out there, but do it well. In other words, what I found some people is doing a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, I'm going to use AI now, and I don't have to hire that staff person. I'll just do AI, or I'll just use social media, not get a marketing person. And that may be the right thing for your organization. But I think the key is, how do you continue to connect with your donors? That's going to be one of the most important things. In fact, I had someone on my show, and they have a book called The Generosity Crisis. And they talk about this really sad trend line downwards for nonprofits. And they talk about having radical connection with your donors. And I like that term of radical connection. And what they mean by that simply is that you just drop everything and say, we need to focus on our donors. And that means building relationships, really having those authentic, face-to-face, personal contacts, not just leaning on AI, for example, not just leaning on really great social media campaigns, but getting to know your donors personally. They feel like that is going to be the dividing mark, if you will, for nonprofits that continue to trend upwards with their giving, because people do want to know who they're giving to. And so utilize your AI tools, but use them wisely and never let that kind of high tech replace high touch, meaning being really highly relational with your donors. And so I think as long as we keep relationships front and center, I think nonprofits will continue to do well and can reverse that trend, actually. But if they don't, and they don't realize, hey, your giving is probably going down, and here's why, and they just pretend, oh, let's just keep doing what we're doing, that's not going to work, I don't think, anymore. And I think the margins are getting thinner. So
imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location, so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, I like that book, Generosity Crisis by Nathan Chappell. I did a webinar with him a while back about it through the local AFP chapter. And yeah, I think that human to human connection is so important. But for some reason, most of the nonprofits that I at least start to work with lack the direction on how to implement that human to human connection. Maybe they're used to government grants or events, and creating that real authentic relationship proves to be a barrier for some reason that I can't explain. Can you give some insight into some of the challenges nonprofits face with building that human to human connection, and then go into some of the solutions on the other side of how they can start to build that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think number one, it depends, first of all, like how big is your organization? So say if you're on the smaller to medium size, the executive director is probably going to be the primary donor relation person and or maybe a part-time development person, and maybe you have a full-time person. So whoever's charged with development, to me, a big portion of what that person's job should be is literally having sit down one-on-ones, having coffees, having lunches, getting together, going to events, getting to know people personally, and really investing time. You almost have to, quote, waste time, but you feel like you're wasting all this time, but it's because it's not wasted, right? It's an investment in a relationship. As you develop that and as you value that as an organization, I think you're going to see big dividends. So number one is just literally getting to know people and really connecting with them. Like I said, human to human. I think it's one of the best things. Now, on the flip side, then, if you're a large organization, then I think you really invest as the executive director and your development team. You do that as a team. Now, here's what's interesting. I've found this to be true, and I think some of your listeners may find this to be true. Sometimes when nonprofits are having issues with their fundraising, it's not just a fundraising issue. It's often an organizational issue. In other words, there may be something organizationally just off. There's some, I don't know, there's just some dysfunction in the team perhaps, or there's just bad communication, or there's allocation of resources going to the wrong places. And so therefore it's an organizational issue that kind of rolls out into fundraising and impacts negatively your fundraising efforts. So to remedy that, you can't just look at the fundraising kind of in isolation. You have to go back to the whole organization and say, what is going on in this organization that may be causing a lack of fundraising efforts to really be positive? So I think that's something that nonprofits ought to really look at, is look at both your organizational culture and what you're doing as a whole and your fundraising, not just your fundraising in isolation.
I love that you brought that up, because I talk a lot about how fundraising is an inside job, and my role, fundraising consultant, is to get buy-in and belonging so that you can focus on the right fundraising strategies. And I think it's so important. And a lot of the work that you talk about is this idea of co-creation, and that it's not just the fundraising department, but we really have to co-create this environment where everyone is involved in fundraising and driving the mission forward. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by this idea of co-creation?
Yeah, that's a good term. I like that. I think when it comes to and applies to fundraising, I think you nailed it. I think this idea that as opposed to saying, let's hire a development person and they'll do development, why don't you flip that around and reframe it and say, let's create a development culture where everybody on your team at some level understands now their responsibility is not full-time development, but it is to be an ambassador for the organization. It is to be fulfilling that mission. It is to have an opportunity to talk to their volunteers or talk to the people that are impacting in the community about what the difference the organization's making, and thereby they're becoming development staff by extension, if you will. So I think really that idea of, are you a culture of development or do you have a development person? That's a big difference. And I think the key would be co-creating, would be realizing we're all a team. We're all doing this together. We support each other in that. And obviously, if the development person is very successful, they're going to support the overall team, which then helps everybody make sure that they can, pay the bills and have salaries and expand their programs. But if the program folks too are helping the development person, well, that of course is wonderful. Like we've had that with our own organization, where oftentimes our volunteers are the ones interacting with our program director, our operation director, maybe not first with the development director, or if they do impact or interact with the development director, they know, well, that person is going to ask me something. Whereas if it's the program team or the rest of the staff, it's much more of a casual, defenses are down, so to speak, right, conversation. And so, but when the team as a whole knows, hey, every opportunity is just to talk about the mission, how we're accomplishing the mission, you're really, in a sense, fulfilling a development role. And I think so that co-creation really means we're doing this together and we all win when we're doing this together.
I love that. So I think also development departments sometimes operate in silos, and not everyone understands the role of fundraising, right? They just think it's about asking for money or going to talk to high net worth donors, but there's so much more that goes into fundraising. And so do you have professional development resources that you can recommend, or ideas to provide education for every single person in the organization to really understand what fundraising is?
That's a good question. Yeah, there's a lot of different resources out there. First of all, there's all kinds of great options for getting training. Honestly, without going through a huge list, you can just Google a lot of that and just look for fundraising resources, whatever development resources. For example, there's a lot of good, that's where I think sometimes you can actually use AI for good. There's some CRM software that can really be used really well for development, tracking some of your big events using some of that technology. Full disclosure, DonorBox is a sponsor of my podcast. DonorBox as one example of many. Again, there's many out there, but they have great resources. And a lot of it is something they'll do for you. And so if you have a team, they can you get a subscription or whatever you want. In fact, there's no real annual fee for them. Once you get in and start with them, they pretty much eliminate some of the fees. And so what's nice about that is the entire team can utilize that resource. So whatever you want to decide, whatever software or other program you want to use, I think make that available to everybody. Do some training, offer them some training to say, here's what you can do with this. Maybe you were using Salesforce. Well, here's how we can really maximize and mine the data that's in Salesforce for the good of the organization. So I would say intentionally training and reminding people that each one of them have a role in development. And then, providing the training. The other thing would be, I happen to be in Park City, Utah. And so Utah, but I think every state has this. They have some kind of nonprofit association that supports the nonprofits in that particular state. There are always some great training typically offered there, because I've been involved with Utah and in Colorado with that. And so oftentimes that can also be an annual fee, but it's well worth it because they provide things all throughout the year. And oftentimes, once you're a member, all the trainings are free, or most of the trainings are free. And so you can make it really accessible to a lot of staff members by getting involved with an association. I found that to be really well worth your time. So I think there's lots of resources out there. I think what I found is the hesitation or the hindrance is organizations just not saying it's worth it. Let's invest rather than looking at it as an expense. Look at it as an investment in the organization. By when you train your team to be, again, part of that development effort, it's really an investment in your team and an investment in your organization, not an expense.
Yes, I love that. And I just wrote about this the other day, and I think it's been going all over, at least on my LinkedIn page, on this idea of investing in your people and investing in professional development. Because what I've seen, especially a part of AFP local, is that people didn't want to send their people to our chapter meeting because they didn't want to lose them. And so
interesting.
Investing in them in the first place was a hindrance to then them getting and gaining all of this knowledge to then leave the organization. My mentor and coach, Don Reese, who's also been on the podcast, says, I'm going to invest in my people because if I invest in them now and they leave, I know I'm making the sector a better place.
That's right. Well, I like that. That's a better perspective. Yes. It's the long game, so to speak. Yeah, you're investing in the overall sector. Yeah, love that.
Yeah, definitely. So as a fundraiser and as an organization, you want to keep the momentum going. You want to have motivation and energy to contribute. So within a team dynamic, what strategies do you use to maintain those high levels of motivation and energy?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Number one, it starts really with the stories of impact. So whatever your organization's involved with, if it's, again, rescuing animals, if it's food insecurity, if it's health disparities, have stories of actual impact that your organization's having. And just make sure on a regular basis, you're telling those stories, you're sharing it at management meetings, you're sharing it through whatever internal communication you have. You're certainly sharing it on your social media page, doing videos of people that are impacted by your organization. I feel like actual life impact or life change makes a big difference. And so when people see that, they get excited. They're like, oh my gosh, I was a part of that. I helped make an impact, a real impact, whatever their role is in the organization. And that plays into fundraising too. So I think that's a big one, is just showing the life change is really important. And then I think showing the results. So if you have a big event and it's really successful, celebrate it. Make sure everyone is recognized and they're celebrated well. You celebrate the wins, so to speak, right? So you get people excited about it and then say, okay, the next time we're going to do this, we have another event coming up in 3 months. This is what our goal is for that. Getting people to get some input on maybe shaping the event if you're an event-driven fundraising organization, or even just ask for input in terms of how do we continue to grow our organization. Well, part of that is going to be fundraising. And so I think the more you get people engaged and listen to their input, that gets them excited because they have a actual input. They're actually having a say in some of that. So I think those two things, storytelling and getting them involved, letting them have more input, will keep that energy and that excitement going. And then when you do have those wins and you get a great big grant that came in, or you get a big gift from an individual donor, tell people. And if it was like one person who wrote a grant, celebrate that person who wrote the grant and say, way to go, you just brought in 50,000 to the organization. Whatever that is, that generates momentum, and I think it increases motivation to be involved.
Yeah, I think this idea of a culture of celebration is so important, right? Because we get that $50,000 grant and then we're like, oh, well, now we have to go apply for 100,000. And, taking that time to acknowledge people's efforts and their contribution to the mission is so important to driving that momentum and making people feel valued in their role, that they were able to commit in a meaningful way. As we talk about like fundraising, we've obviously talked about it being a cultural thing and an organization-wide thing, but have you seen key traits of a successful fundraiser? And what are some of those key traits? Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today.
I think, number one, the ability to really clearly communicate what you're asking and what the organization's about. In other words, like if you can't communicate clearly and really simply, here's what the mission is, here's how you can help the mission move forward. And then third, here's a story of how people that have given to this organization have really helped have this kind of impact in the community or on this person's life. So I think communication is just really critical, I think. So I look for that when it comes to fundraising. Can you communicate really well who we are, what the need is, and how someone can get involved? So I think that's number one. I think number two is relationships. We've actually had conversations as a board and with our staff. What are some of those key traits? Is almost really this exact question. And sometimes you don't need someone who has just this tons of experience. Now, that's always great if you do, but say you're trying to hire for this position and you're listening to this, we're like, well, we just lost our fundraising development person. We need a new person. What are you looking for? If you can get the experience, great. Sometimes that's difficult because then they come with a higher price tag. So I found if someone is really good in relationships, is very relational and able to connect with almost anybody, and maybe has less fundraising experience, that's worth a hire. And the reason is you can train them on some of the skill set of the actual fundraising skill set of some of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of fundraising. But it's really difficult to train how to build relationships. Oftentimes people are either just wired to be relationally strong or not, or have high relational intelligence or not. And so I feel like if you have someone who's highly relational and can connect with people authentically, you can train the other skills of fundraising. So that'd be one of my recommendations is look for that. So I think relational skills is really critical. And I think the third one would just be the willingness just to persevere. You've been in fundraising for a while. I've been in for quite a while. And sometimes it can be discouraging, right? You have to deal with donors that maybe get upset about something, or they were a donor 2 years ago and all of a sudden they've stopped giving. You're not sure why. And you reach out to them, they don't respond. And so you can definitely run into some barriers when it comes to fundraising. So just not giving up, just having a high level of, we can persevere through this. Don't take things personally. Keep moving forward. And I think the way you do that is keep reminding yourself, why am I at this organization? What's the mission of the organization? What's the impact? And hopefully that'll motivate you personally to persevere through some of those setbacks, or when you get a closed door, when you do an ask, or you submit a grant and they turn it down. That can be very discouraging. And so I think just being able to persevere through it and having always that memory of, I'm here because of this. I'm here to impact people. Yes, I'm going to have some setbacks along the way, but I'm really still here to do everything I can to accomplish that mission. My role is to fundraise for this organization. And so I found that helps keep people motivated when they have those setbacks.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And definitely to also view those rejections or those setbacks as growth opportunities, to really ask those good questions of what went well in this situation? Like, where did our team come to work well together? And also, what can we do to make this better in the future? Because sometimes also a closed door to nonprofits is not always a no. It's a
That's right. Exactly. That's right. Good point.
Could be a not right now.
Could be just later, come back later, right?
So it's really important to ask questions to understand the whole context of the situation. And, you were talking about your work with the board. Can you talk a little bit more about the role of a fundraiser and their interaction with the board and what that should look like?
Yeah, that's another good question. So the board and the fundraiser, I think really seeing your board, number one, just honoring who they are. Most boards, they're just because they love the mission. They're volunteers most of the time, not always, but most of the time. And so just treating them with respect, number one. Number two, realizing though, the board is also one of your best sources of connecting with other donors. They can be your mouthpieces. They can represent the organization. They may have friends. They most likely have friends that can support the organization. And oftentimes, depends how you put together your board. Sometimes you'll have board members that have a high net worth, that have leverage and have the ability to really support your organization, but they often have a network of friends that are in the same economic, level that can really write some big checks to support your organization. So really working with them, encouraging them, even maybe training them how to do fundraising very naturally and very authentically. And it could be as simple as an invite strategy where they just invite people to a dinner that you then present, or invite them to a lunch where you build a relationship with the development person or the fundraising leader of your organization. So I think really strategically thinking of that board as some of your key people to make those contacts. Going back to what we said earlier about relationships, really everything, I feel like. And so building into the relationships that are already there in your organization starts with your board, right? Because they can be one of your best assets. And then third would just be continuing to tell them, feed them stories, let them know what's going on. Because I found oftentimes the board is busy and they're volunteers. And so it's not in their front and center purview every day about what's going on in their organization. So if you don't proactively, either as an executive director or as the fundraising development director, if you're not giving them stories, giving them information, sending them data on your program results or how many people are impacting in a given quarter or a year for sure, they don't have a lot to share. So make sure that it's at least minimum monthly communication on here's what's going on, here's an impact report, here's a cool story, or here, just so you know, I met with this one person and oh my goodness, they were so impacted by what we were able to serve them with, provide them with. So the more information they have, the more stories they have, the more data they have, the more they feel empowered to be able to represent your organization, then really be an advocate to their friends and to the community as a whole. So I think that's probably one of the most important things for fundraisers, to make sure they're well informed as to what's going on in your organization.
Yeah, I think that's so important to educate and equip them with the information that's out, and then become your best ambassadors and advocates. It's something you said earlier, and then one of the key traits of a nonprofit fundraiser, you said that a strong organization has a clear mission, and a nonprofit fundraiser has to have that ability to communicate that clear vision and mission. And I've shared this on the podcast before, that I've worked with organizations where they're doing like 5 million different things. And as a fundraiser, it's hard for me to really understand what the core meaning is, but it's hard to communicate when they're having all of these programs that don't all relate. So how do you
Right.
coach a nonprofit organization to really get clear on that mission so that from the bottom to the top and top down, everyone is communicating that clear mission? Because I found that also is hard for a board to then go out and become ambassadors because they're confused and they're like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this organization. And that's one of the most crucial things to do is have your board talk on behalf of the organization, right? But it starts with that clear mission. So how can organizations really get that clear mission so then the fundraiser can do their job well?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm doing coaching and consulting, and I've got a client actually right now that's actually starting an organization from scratch, wanting to start a nonprofit. And we've been talking about this very thing of it's really critical when you are starting to get advocates around you that can help spread the word when you're starting a nonprofit from scratch. But certainly that doesn't change when the nonprofit grows. And maybe as it gets bigger and you have a bigger budget, it becomes even more important, right? Because now you have more money you need to raise. And yeah, I feel like the most important thing, if you just will it down to one thing, and there's multiple things, of course, but one of the most critical things I found is make sure you can get your mission or vision sometimes, get it to the point where it's portable. Make sure it's absolutely clear. This is what we do. What is your organization? Okay, sometimes you'll have this wonderful vision statement or a mission statement, a couple sentences long. And so when someone's in the elevator at an event, at a party, and they're asked, okay, well, tell me more about this organization. And they're like, okay, what's the mission statement? They can't think of it because it's like you said, it's too complicated or the programs are all over the map. But if they just have one portable statement, share that. There's actually just one example for us, my organization, our motto, if you will, is we meet people at their point of need. We meet people at their point of need. That's like the starting point of any conversation. What do you do? Well, we meet people right at their point of need. Okay, and then that starts a conversation from there. There's another organization, it's a fellow organization here in the city I live in, and they conserve land. And they had this really long statement at one time, and basically they whittled it down and changed their website to wesaveland.org. Like, it's perfect. They realized they had this real convoluted kind of mission about all these different things that they were doing, and it was water and this and that. And it really is no, at the end of the day, when someone asks you, what do? We save land. So it was super portable. It was clear. So from the top of the organization to the bottom, they know this is what we do. It's right here. And so I would recommend that for anybody is whittle your mission vision down to a portable statement motto and make sure everyone knows it.
Yeah, I think it's something like it should be less than 7 words or something. And like, you got to take out all the jargon and all the like things to make it clear, concise. So that, like you said, you meet people at your point of need, then your people are going to be like, well, what's the need? What does that actually mean? And it starts that conversation where then you can explain a little bit more that you all wanted to fit into that one sentence, but like clear, concise, and like spark that conversation is so important.
That's right.
So as someone who has held an executive leadership role, what advice would you give to aspiring nonprofit leaders who are looking to make a significant impact in their organizations and communities?
Yeah, first of all, way to go just for being interested in wanting to do that. I think what would I do as advice, or what would I give as advice is go for it. First of all, don't back down. I think they may get hit with a lot of, well, that's not practical, or you're not going to make much money working in the nonprofit sector, or all these why you don't want to do it. And so I think if you're aspiring to go into the nonprofit sector and you really want to be a fundraiser because you so believe in this mission of whatever organization you're wanting to be a part of, grab a hold of that vision and just run with it. I think the best advice, though, besides just capture that vision and really step forward and don't shy away from it, connect as quickly as possible with people that are, 10 years down the road, maybe 5 years even, maybe even 20 years down the road that have been doing it for a long time. Take them out to lunch or coffee or whatever, buy them a coffee and get it on the organization's bill and say, tell me everything you've learned in your years of being a fundraiser, and really get a ton of advice and just listen. Because I think why that'll be really important is passion will get you so far. It'll keep you going, and you need passion, but believe me, because there's a lot of barriers, right? Just to going into the fundraising field, going into the nonprofit sector. Yes, you probably could make some more money if you went to the for-profit sector. So there's a lot of things that may be hurdles, if you will, getting there. But if you have passion, that'll get you going. But to keep you going and sustain that so you really can get to the point where you feel like you're making a difference and you're really now involved in the nonprofit sector and helping your organization truly make a lasting impact, I think you'll need the wisdom of other people that have been there, that have done that can tell you, here's what kept me in the game. Here's what helped me overcome all those setbacks and all those closed doors. This is what helped me stay connected to the mission of the organization, not get burnt out. This has kept my fires going with the organization I'm in. So I think that's probably honestly the best advice I would give, is really connect with them. And then I guess the third just would be in the final, get as much information as you can, get as much training as you can. You mentioned it before. What is out there? Well, there's all kinds of things out there. There's a lot of stuff for free. So you can find a bunch of things online. There's a lot of great podcasts. Both you and I have podcasts. There's a lot of great information that if you put yourself to it, you don't have to spend a lot of money. There's a lot of information out there that you can train yourself and learn. And I think that'll keep your fire going. And it'll also structure a little bit of what you need to do to improve as a fundraiser, to grow as a development person. So yeah, if I think you do those three things, have your passion, move forward on your passion, really connect with people that have been in the field for a long time. And then if you just keep educating yourself ongoing, even if you've been in it for 5 or 10 years, you never can learn too much. It always keeps you sharp. I think those things will really be the best advice I can give to anybody who's aspiring to move into this field.
Yes, I think that's so good. And I said I built my career on a little passion, a little Google, and a lot of networking and mentoring.
I like that.
I think, those three components are so important. Your passion, really building those mentors. I've even had some of those relationships that I had that they willingly took me out to coffee when I was a shy, introverted, nonprofit professional just entering in there. We see you, we see potential in you. Let's go for coffee. Or I asked them, I was like, hey, you're so well known in this organization. Can I buy you coffee and have conversations? And now 10 years later, we're still having conversations, or they've been on my podcast and things like that. So I think, and also just investing in yourself, both personally and professionally, is so important. Dr. Rob, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest probably would go to literally robharter.com. That's my coaching and consulting website. So robharter.com, or nonprofitleadershippodcast.org, or just Google Nonprofit Leadership Podcast and my podcast usually pops up. So either of those are probably the best way. And then my email's embedded in both of those websites. And you can feel free to reach out to me if you want to be on my show too, or if you want to learn more, I would be happy to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rob, for sharing your valuable insights with us today. Your passion and commitment to nonprofit leadership and coaching is truly inspiring.
Awesome. Thank you, Haley, for having me on the show. Great to be here.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.